across the road from this building and await instructions from the staff. Everyone needs to be aware that this meeting is being live streamed and will be available on YouTube. Reminder to everyone to speak directly into their microphones. They're very sensitive. And one speaker at a time for clarity, please. And can everyone turn off their mobile phones or turn them onto silent? Shad, can I ask you to open a karakia, thanks.
Kia ora no tātou, kia koe rā Anne. I whakahaere nei tēnei o tō tātou nei hui. Tēnā koe, huri a ki rā, kia tātou katoa, kia koutou rā e tai nei ki te whakatakato hiara i ngā kōrero tēnā koutou katoa. Nō reira, kia nui tātou. E honore e korore ki te atua, he mai ngā rongo ki te whenua whakaro pai ki ngā tangata katoa. E te atua anei rā tātou katoa e noho nei, tuku whakareo, tuku wenei reo whakamoeneti, wenei reo whakawhetai ki a koe. Toro mai rā tōringa ka hakirunga ki tēnā mātou, hei arahi nei, ia tātou i roto i nei mahi. Nō reira, tēnei mā tūna tēnei ki a koe, korore ki tōna tapu. Amen.
Thank you, Shad. So on the agenda, we have no apologies. Everyone's here. No one has asked to speak in the public forum. We've got two late items. One is an updated item that replaces the Tauranga Art Gallery item in the agenda. And the second is in public excluded, which is the appointment of CCO board members for Te Manawataki or Te Papa. You move, thank you, and Shad seconding. Any discussion that we accept those as late items? None? All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. And both of those were circulated on Friday. No business that I'm aware of to be transferred from public excluded to open. I'm not aware of any change of order of the business. And that brings us to the minutes of the council meeting held on the 27th of February. Any corrections? You move the minutes. True and correct record. Stephen seconding those. I just had one query on Mr. Singh's, is it Mr. Singh? Yeah, Mr. Singh's petition. Have we got an update on that, or is there an update coming to us on that? Robin?
I can update in the fact that I know that the infrastructure and bus shelter people have been in contact with Mr. Singh and are working on progressing that shelter.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so it's been moved and seconded, nothing else? All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Thank you. That brings us then to conflicts of interest. Shared?
So similar to last time, I am contracted to do work for the Crown on RM reform, and it also touches into three waters. So item 11.3 around the submission, I'll refrain from participating in that conversation.
Thanks, Shad. None others? No deputations, presentations or petitions. We have no recommendations from other committees. That brings us to the first business for the day, which is Bay Venue's proposed draft user fees and charges schedule. And Chad, would you like to come and talk through with us? Good morning. And it's Adam, yes, sorry. I'm looking down here and I've got Paul Davidson and Anne Blakeway. And you don't look like either of those.
No, not quite. Kia ora koutou. We are reporting back following the meeting on the 27th of February. We presented our proposed user fees and charges, and you asked us to go away and have another look at those. We have come back with an update and increased the user fees and charges slightly. Effectively, we've looked at the aquatic facilities and brought Ultimotai memorial pools into line with Greerton, so less differentiation in pricing across facilities. And we've also pushed up in some areas around our community centres and halls. That gives us an increase in forecast revenue of about just over $100,000, which takes the suggested increase across everything to about 1.1 from where you saw it last time. We've also followed your recommendation to kind of decouple the council funding from the user fees and charges, and we are looking to come back in May to look at council's funding, including the operating subsidy and the capital funding model that's in place for bay venues as well. And we're working closely with Paul and his team around what that looks like moving forward. We're still aware that this will put pressure on users and user groups, and are aware of some concerns in the community from some groups around the increase to fees, but still consider it to be fair and reasonable, given the benchmarking exercise that we've done and in light of the increased costs that we're bearing across the business as well. So I'm happy to take any further questions on that.
Thanks, Chad. And I think we all realise that this is going to be a really tough year for a lot of our community. But the reality is they're going to pay if they don't pay through if we don't make sure that the user charges are kept up to date and in line. And I think our line is that everyone pays their fair share. So where we can actually have the beneficiaries paying for the services that they receive, to keep that current, because otherwise we've got to subsidise it through rates, and that's going to be tough too. So we're caught either way. The costs are going up, and we do need to keep up with our charges. So thanks for the extra work that you and Adam, I'm sure, put a bit of time into. Any other comments, Stephen?
Thank you, Chair, and I'm happy to move the recommendations. I in particular was keen to make sure, as you say, that we've got our user fees and charges right. And it's for the reason that you've outlined, Chair, but it's also for the reason that if we don't charge enough, we can't provide enough. And the legacy of just continually holding fees and rates has cost the city dearly. And I think, it's a responsibility for us to make sure that we are charging a fair and appropriate fee, and that's what we've asked you to look at, and that's what you've come back with. Yes, I do understand that there will be members of the community that are concerned about the increase in fees, and to those, I would say, if we don't increase the fees, then we won't be able to provide the sort of level of service that you as a community want as well. So we're trying to get the balance right here. And I think you've done a good job in striking that balance. So thank you for your extra review, and I think it was worthwhile.
I'm happy to second, Chair, and just in doing so, just noting and what Bay Venues had identified, where the standard of facilities did not meet an appropriate level in accord with that national benchmark. So along with the affordability, I think just acknowledging the work in that space, that we do need to bring up the standard of some of our facilities over a period of time to enable probably a charging regime that actually reflected what that benchmark and the appropriate user experience. So the messaging in that is that continual need to upgrade those particular facilities over a period of time.
Thank you. Nothing? No, thank you. Thank you very much. And I think it's right to do it this way, to uncouple it from that, because I mean, 2 years ago we identified that operating expenditure grant hadn't been increased for a large period of time, and I think with the work that the board's doing, there is an opportunity for a wider discussion and making that much more transparent. So I think we're on the right track here. All right, so it's been moved and seconded. No further discussion. I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you very much. See you in May. Right, so that brings us to the Tauranga Art Gallery, and we are on the late report. Anne.
Good morning. take the report really as read. What we're asking here is just to confirm the funding for the new entranceway into Masonic Park for the art gallery, and all of this will be externally funded, not fall on ratepayers, apart from the 1.5 million that was already secured in the long-term plan. So happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I think it's really important that as we upgrade Masonic Park, that the work on the art gallery is done at the same time, rather than having to come back and redo it. So this is quite an important item for us. And we do need the art gallery to be an integral part of Te Manawataki or Te Papa. So it's good that they've been working so hard with us. Now, I know there's a question. Bill, yes.
Thanks, Chair. And I'm support the recommendations, Anne. I do note, though, that in paragraph 7, it talks about the provided the work is completed by mid-24, the escalation costs will reduce to 150,000. So that's quite a substantial reduction. And I was just going to suggest, Chair, that given that is the situation, is that the expenditure of those reduced escalation costs comes back to council. The reason I raise that, it would be quite easy for that to disappear somewhere, probably for a well-intended purpose, but I think it's just part of the discipline of these projects as we go forward.
So are you moving the recommendations with the addition of that? So that would be an E okay.
Through the chair, could I suggest that E could say something like any reduction in escalation costs could offset the original $1.5 million of ratepayer investment. We can report on that in due course.
Any reduction in escalation costs could offset the ratepayer's contribution. Yep. You happy with that? Yep. Thank you. I just had, so that's, you're moving that. Is there a seconder for that? Shad, thank you. Did you want to, yep, go.
So I just wanted to say as well, you know, when we started out looking at Te Manawataki, we made a commitment to the community that, you know, 50% of the total cost would be borne by ratepayers and the other 50% through grant funding. So this is essentially a demonstration of that, yes, there are some additional costs, but actually we found some other ways to fund it. And I think in a way, kind of setting the tone for how we manage the rest of the funding, I think is really important, particularly from a community point of view and a public perception, confidence point of view. I just wanted to make that point.
Thank you. The only question I had, and was in the report, and it may be because with very bad toothache over the weekend and a root canal on Friday and antibiotics and things, my head wasn't exactly in the right place. But paragraph 17 talks about stage 2 works, and I didn't quite understand what the stage 2 works were. Stage 2 works will commence on formal sign-off of the preferred development option.
So there's two pieces of work really. There's one in regards to the external entrance onto Masonic Park, so moving that from Wharf Street to Masonic Park. And then the second part of works relates to the internal rejuggling of spaces to better utilise the available space once the entrance is moved. And there's some initial thoughts on how that could work and be laid out that Warren and Marnie have done, but there's quite a little bit of work to do with the gallery team once the budget's there to actually sit down and go, okay, well, the entrance is moving, we're doing a jewel box at that end, what does the inside look like? So there's still a bit of work to do there.
As long as understood, there's no more money, and we don't want the scope to increase.
Correct.
Right. Okay. Anything further? So I'll put the motion then. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. So that brings us to the Three Waters submission. And this is just actually receiving the report and noting that we made the submission. And Bill and I talked to the select committee, who thanked us very much, and we should pass on those thanks for a very thorough submission, with good suggestions for changes to the legislation and clarification to the legislation. And we had that, I think, from at least 3 members, including the chair. So staff did a really good job of putting that together. Thank you. Did you want to make any comments?
No, I think we're all good. It's nice to get it through and finalised.
So as much as we would like to ask Wally hard questions, did you want to make a comment, Wally?
I was just going to ask that we take it as read, and if there are any questions, they've referred to Kathy Davidson or Diane Bussey.
Thanks, Bill, and Stephen second. But you know, for anyone looking through it, and I know that the public are very interested in what's happening with the Three Waters, but this submission was a very technical submission. So the legislation to actually establish the entities has been passed. We still took the opportunity, whilst the government is taking a bit of a breather, to relay some of the concerns of our community, but also to put forward again our suggestion for a better governance structure that would then address some of the concerns our communities have about the accountability of their ownership and contribution to building the asset over many, many years. It will be interesting to see whether any of that is taken into account in the government's refresh. But the rest of the submission was very technical on the next 2 bills, which are just as important, because we do want to make sure that it's about the operations of this entity and its responsibilities, and we do want to make sure that we don't end up having particularly our urban development of this city designed by what is essentially a utility. So I think one of the important points that was made in the submission is that the entity is a plan taker, not a plan maker. And Bill expressed that very strongly to the select committee. But other than that, the lawyers had a great time, and the technical experts did a great job. So thank you very much. And on that note, I'll move. All right. I think you've moved and Stephen second. I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks, Wally. Okay, so that brings us to the Line e-scooter trial. Oh, Brendan. Oh,
I was just going to introduce Andy. He's written the paper, so I'll let him pass across.
Good morning.
Andy, so I'm looking at you here, but the camera's up there, and they're looking at you there, but the camera's up there. So, do you want to talk to your paper? An interesting paper, I have to say.
Thanks. We'll take the report as read. I think there'll be some questions, and so really we'll open the floor for questions.
I think my biggest surprise was looking at the input from the over 85s. Yeah. It was most unexpected to find that they were very much in support and had been users of Lime e-scooters.
Yeah, I think there's always a grain of salt you have to take with surveys, especially when the responses can be 1 or 2. I think there are 2 things with the survey that I think were unsurprising but really drastic when we looked at it. Was just the age gap in general. So the over 85 was unique because there was only a few responses, but just the difference in As you got older, you typically were against e-scooters, and as you got younger, you typically were very much in favor of e-scooters.
Yeah, I think you're right. I did think it's probably that in the survey the number of plus 85s who answered was probably few. Yes, Bill.
Thanks, Andy, and thanks for a good report. I just have a question around your paragraph 18, where you're talking about a number of things that the council can look to implement with these scooters that help address the issues that you'd highlighted earlier on in the report. And there were 3 points that you've made from A to C. So I'm just inquiring in terms of where that thinking and work is at, or are you waiting for us to consider this today and then looking at those potential solutions to those issues?
Yeah, so I think we've been thinking about this for the last 6 to 12 months. Really, as the first year of the trial progressed, we started to get an indication about what are the pain points that we were seeing in the community we're seeing, and what are the potential opportunities. I think one of the challenging parts is going to be this kind of dance between the technology improving, which is happening rapidly. So like iPhones or like any sort of technology devices, these scooters from a software and a hardware standpoint are changing really month by month. And then from a council standpoint, it's the appetite to be able to do the things that we had talked about. So reallocation of road space, reallocation of potentially on-road parking spots into other modes. And so from a progression standpoint, I think where we're at now is we really think that the technology, we can really choose that really rapidly. We feel very comfortable that we'll be able to find the right operator who has the right technology. The next piece is really part political and part an allocation of where, looking at the analysis, we should put these potential parking spots, we'll call them.
Thanks for the report, Andy. And I was interested in the statistics summarised under paragraph 5 on the agenda. Do you have any sense as to what proportion mode, what percentage mode that might be? 710,000 kilometres sounds like a lot of kilometres, but I think there are so many billion kilometres travelled in the region. So yeah, is it
yeah, so
0.1% or what is it?
Yeah, so what we've seen is a lot of the research has come from the operators themselves and from third-party sources like Ride Report, and they estimate around 25 to 29% of rides replace car trips. And so from a scale standpoint, you can start to see these can add up quickly from whole numbers, but are a drop in the bucket compared to wider transport modes potentially. But one of the things that is unique is this still focuses directly on shared e-scooters, while we know that private e-scooter usage, which is very hard to track because they don't have the same type of technology and GPS, those are also growing. And so, we can expect that of the 340,000 trips we've taken, about 100,000 have been for, we would call some sort of commuting purpose.
Thanks, Andy. I had a similar question to Stephen around commuter use and trying to understand that as opposed to recreation. As a probably once a month user of a Lime scooter, for commuting, I would say, from the office usually to home, I do find them really convenient and easy to use. But yeah, I was kind of interested looking at your statistics, 32% of trips less than 5 minutes, the 48% less than a kilometre. And it seems to me there's a low usage in the morning, there's high in the afternoons and into the evening, and then high weekend usage. So probably similar to Stephen, I was really interested in how much of that is actually commuter. So picking up your point, 29% being for commuter use. Well, it seems small. I think it's still useful to try and get people thinking about transport differently in the different modes, and this is an option for people to use like myself sometimes when my bus might be running late. So I do think it's a worthwhile opportunity for us to promote and continue to support. So I'm supportive of I don't know if this recommendation has been moved, so I'm happy to move it. But I do have a question, and that's in relation to the fees that we collect. And so interested that 29,000, I think, from the report that we've collected is that through the whole trial, or is that on an annual basis? And I suppose the question for me is, the fees that we collect, where does that go? Does it go back into, or do we target transport, and does it go towards a transport activity, or does it just come back into council in some way?
Yeah, so the fees are an estimate per annum. So in the report, we talk about, based on the about 150 to 170,000 trips which we've gotten each of the years, we would expect about $25,000 in operator fees, and there are some licensing fees to use some software that we use to track the system. So that's a per annum basis. If the rides were to continue, we would get about $23,000 to $25,000 a year, kind of in a net revenue standpoint. As far as I'm aware, the revenue goes into the transport activity of accessible streets, which is kind of governing and guiding this trial. I think it can be targeted to other things if council so chooses to do that. For the trial, we just had it come back and recoup some of the expenses from the staff itself that mostly came from our department.
Thanks, Andy.
What I was going to say is we put the funding into there because while it was a trial, it was a very short-term duration. If this was to extend, we could look at actually using it for some purpose, because we'd have sort of known revenue coming in. I think initially we just thought it's only for 1 or 2 years, but if it's an ongoing thing, we could actually use that funding for something because we have reliability of the funding source. I think the other question, just in terms of commuters versus recreational use, what you tend to find, because Lyme was in Christchurch prior to here, what you tend to find is those that use it a lot for commuting purposes end up actually purchasing a private scooter, because obviously after a while it doesn't make sense to keep hiring. And that's what the data doesn't track, because we're only picking up the ones that Lyme use. So there will be a skew towards more recreational use, but if you look around, you do see a lot of private scooters out and about now. And I think it's a good pathway to that mode. So, people try it on Lyme. If they use it regularly, they generally then go and purchase their own and continue to use it.
And so thinking about, so if we pass this and you would then be working on that guaranteed income, and you would then come back to us perhaps with the fee structure where you're suggesting that we put in place something that will incentivise good behaviour, good use of them.
No, most certainly.
And can I just check that we're looking, particularly in the CBD, as we develop that for parking places for scooters?
We will do, and it's something we've got to look at is, because at the moment a lot of them are stored on the footpaths, etc., which is problematic because, they fall over or people knock them over. So I think we need to look at, can we either create space or use some of the car parks, because you can fit a lot of scooters in a single car park and actually reallocate some of that road space.
A few empty spaces up and down Devonport Road that we might be able to use. Okay, so it's been moved by Shad, seconded by Stephen, is that right? Any further discussion? No. So the recommendations are there that we conclude the trial and permit them to e-scooters to operate on an ongoing fashion, and you'll start the process to select. And we would just end up with one vendor is your recommendation.
Correct. We're not quite a big enough city to have multiple vendors. And if you have multiple vendors, people are never quite sure who they contact. So it's easier to have a single supplier.
Okay. Happy with that? All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Thanks, Andy. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
that brings us to draft user fees and charges. Paul?
Yes, so as you're aware, we're not consulting on the annual plan this year, but we are required to consult on user fees under several pieces of legislation. So rather than just select those, we've got the entire user fees to consult on. That will happen from the 24th of March for a month. Overall, the fees have been increased approximately 6%. There are some exceptions which are noted in the report. The 6% is made up of around approximately 2% from last year, where we were falling behind the inflation rate. So inflation rate we assumed for last year's annual plan was 5.7%, running at a number over 7% in real terms, plus the forecast for next year. So the 4 plus 2 is effectively the 6% increase that's been included within those user fees. I'll take any questions.
Or Bill, then Stephen.
Thanks, Paul. Support what's in the report. What the question I had though, and I'm looking ahead to the next LTP, is that I'm unsure, and particularly where there are activities where there is a percentage of rates funding, what that percentage ideally should be, and whether it's building services or dogs or whatever. So coming back for the LTP, it would be great to have a much better handle on what the policy or a proposed policy framework is for the percentage of an activity where there is rates funding vis-a-vis the user fees and charges, so that if that's in place, there's adjustments to the user fees, and then being also clear what the rates component is, so that they are looked at on a regular basis in terms of that alignment. So I think a review across all the relevant activities from that perspective would be helpful.
So what we do as part of the LTP is bring to you the revenue and financing policy, which goes through each activity's funding model. That funding model will show the difference between whether it be a rate funded activity, a user fee funded activity, or a combination of the two. In the past, the user fee component has been based effectively around the non-public good element effectively from that. And we are also recognising as part of the LTP, particularly where there's been significant investment in those activities, that cost may increase greater than the inflation to pay for that new investment into those activities. So that will definitely be a part of the LTP.
Thank you, and that really primarily answers my question, because I think it is really important to understand, what the ratepayers are being asked to fund vis-a-vis the people that are benefiting from the service, which will be the direct fee payers. To me, I had a look through the schedules. There was quite a few areas that I guess I raised eyebrows as to whether or not the increases were appropriate. And generally I was satisfied, but I think it's important that we do make sure that the fees represent our actual costs, and there was no detail on actually what that looked like, which we will see in the long-term plan discussion. So that's the area that I'm keen to focus in on. If you take our wages pool, what sort of movement have they been and are anticipated to be over the next period? So as a percentage, because a lot of our input is obviously staff costs. We know it's really hard to get people. Rising costs and salaries and wages are an issue.
I can only go from the numbers I sort of know at the moment. Last year we're around that 4%. I think most of the commentary is that there will be a greater wage pressure coming through this year. As to the exact number, we won't have that until later in the year, but we're working on forecasts in that sort of 5% range at this point, but it needs to be confirmed.
So in that context, then 6% probably sits okay, but we also know that council costs are a lot higher than inflation in a lot of areas, and so that would skew you to the upside rather than the downside.
One thing definitely is a number of that we're seeing of contract costs in that 15% range of, so they say certainly some of that cost pressure is flowing through.
I guess, for me, it really reiterates the point I made earlier when we're looking at the BBL charges. If we don't keep pace, then ratepayers end up subsidising, or we don't have enough revenue to invest in the level of service that requires. So getting that balance right is crucial. On the basis of what we had, I'm happy to move the motion if it hasn't already been moved.
So Stephen's moved and Bill's seconding. I think the important thing is because we came here with the LTP, a lot of that preparatory work done, we haven't had that opportunity just to check that we've got that public good versus private good ratio. So that's the opportunity that we'll have this time to take it from the beginning. And I think that's an important part of our whole mantra, that we want to make sure that everyone's paying their fair share, and wherever we can, where there's a private benefit, we're charging appropriately. Is really balance, isn't it? Yeah.
Just a final comment, and it relates to those fees that actually are set in Wellington. It would be good as part of the reporting back to understand there's a finite amount of income because of that fee structure that's set by government. And I know there is some discretion for some other fees to perhaps make up the deficit, but it would be good to understand what that gap is between our costs and what we're able to charge in fees, because we might then need to make some representations elsewhere, because I suspect if there is a gap, that funding then gets paid for by ratepayers as opposed to particular beneficiaries.
All right, nothing more? Yep, Shad.
Thank you. Sorry, I've just got a question, but support the comments that have been made as well. Well, a couple of questions. Just thinking about the $60 million that we collect from fees and charges, I assume that's probably 25% of the revenue that council, along with rates, that council would collect. So 25% would come from fees and charges. Is that what we're...
Just looking at Catherine knows off the top of her head. I think it's a little bit less, but we can confirm that number. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I was just thinking, I don't know what it was like previously, but we are interested, like as you've heard, about trying to get that balance right. But I do have a question, and it's probably just one of clarity. On page 43 of the report, of the appendices, the marine facilities, the Crossroads Boat Park, is that the storage facility that is there? I see that there's annual fees, and they have been increased, but I was just wanting to know, is this the boat storage facility on, I can't remember the name of the road, that heads out towards Sulphur Point? I assume.
That's correct. That's the only boat storage facility down there that I'm aware of. So yes, that would be.
Yeah, and I'm just looking at those fees. I mean, so somebody can park their boat there for a year, in a 10-metre spot for close to $200 for a year. I'm just, maybe when we get to the long-term plan, I would, yeah, I don't know, whether we can dig into that a little bit deeper, and whether that's fair and reasonable for a person to park their boat there for 12 months at $200 a year.
Yes, absolutely can include it. And
is that a month? Okay, well, that sounds better. It sounds better than 12 months. Yeah.
But we will include in the LTP all of our marine facilities, including boat ramps.
Thank you.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further questions? No? All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. So that goes out for consultation end of the week. Is that right? Is that what you said? 24th, yeah, okay. So that then brings us to Omanawa Falls. Barbara.
Thank you.
And Amanda.
So this is just by way of introduction, but I've got Amanda here who can answer all the technical questions. So this is a project that's been on the books for a very, very long time, and it is a very difficult environment to work in, but also a very popular place for people to visit. Hence, I guess while I don't have the history, the reason we actually started this project. There have been delays, mainly more recently outside our ability to influence, and that is the RMA process and the delay due to an appeal to the resource consent, but also to a lesser degree the weather conditions over the last sort of 3 to 4 months have certainly ensured that the enviro has deteriorated. The staff have spent, I'm very cognizant that we don't want to ask for any more money unless we need to, and the staff have spent quite a lot of time researching and putting some options to commissioners for some extra revenue to extra budget to finish this project. So we have talked about it a little bit. So I think that if you're okay with that, we will just go for questions.
Right, so this is a lose-lose really for us, isn't it? It's we're having to spend a lot of ratepayers' money on making this safe because people can insist on ignoring the dangers and risking their lives, and we have a responsibility under health and safety to do our best to protect sometimes stupid people. Unfortunately, that's one of the responsibilities that local government has.
It sums it up very well.
And so we started out with a great project, working with our partners both from Ngāti Hangaro, and also Tourism Bay of Plenty. And then now we've come to a bit of a shuddering halt because of the dangers from the rock formation, and so the completed plan is going to cost a lot more. So it's whether the Commission believes that on behalf of ratepayers we should continue to be putting a lot of money into something, a lot more money into this project, which probably is a regional facility or a sub-regional facility, and it would have been nice to get some help from our fellow councillors, but we haven't got that. So we're looking for a pragmatic solution. Personally, I'm reluctant to put more ratepayers' money into this, but clear that we want to make the best use of the investment that we've already got, and create something that does provide an experience, but keeps as many people as safe as possible, and so that we've taken our responsibility seriously. So I'm in favour of the second option 2, because that does allow us to make the best use of the work that's been done, that fantastic walk through the bush, which in itself is a great experience, and down to the Gulam Bridge. Is it the Gulam Bridge? Have I got that right? Extending that platform so that people can see the waterfall, but not continuing it on past that dangerous rock face, which would need an increase from 100 to 900 odd pins and netting to keep it in place, and considerably more expenditure. But the only thing that, yeah, so that's where I am. I would be happy with a minimal expenditure by ratepayers to create an experience and make the best of. I think if we went with option 1, we would be not doing the ratepayers a service because they've already invested in that walkway considerable amount. I mean, that would be wasted. So that's my opinion.
Did you move that, Chair?
Yeah. Well, I will. I will.
I'll
Yep.
second. In terms of supporting option 2, and certainly no pun intended, but we are between a rock and a hard place on this one. And I think in terms of what we need to do to complete in terms of that option 2, and at least make it safe as a destination. I was amazed at the number of cars and people that actually, whilst that's gone down of recent times, what occurs on a daily basis. What I would like to have noted, probably as a resolution, is that any or completion of any works beyond this option would be totally reliant on external funding. I just wanted to send a message that anything further, that's another funding source, because time we prove this, the well is well and truly dry in terms of further funding than what we're proposing to approve today.
So you're suggesting that the application that's been made to Lottery, Environment and Heritage Fund, if that is successful, that relieves the ratepayers?
Yes, I am.
Input for option 2.
Yep.
Rather than being used for an extension for option 3.
Correct. Yeah. And then if there is an initiative for option 3, again, that is totally externally funded.
Yeah.
Because I think this, what we're approving as well, it is well beyond the original project funding approval. Notwithstanding, I fully understand all the challenges of
Look, totally, we understand. Any money we can get through any formal funds will go towards the option 2. If somebody's happy to come up and find some extra money to make the extra 1.3, but there is a point, Amanda, that they need to come up with that money by, otherwise we need to finish the project. So that's definitely our understanding and the way we'll go forward. If you'd like to formalise that in a resolution, very happy for that as well.
Yes, if we could add that as a C, Chair.
Just before we do that, can I just clarify? I mean, I know that Ngāti Hangaro and Tourism Bay of Plenty are very keen to continue to try and raise funds for option 3, but I think we're making the decision. Just want to be clear that we're not going to hang around for that. We are proceeding with option 2. And therefore, any extra external funds would go towards relieving the ratepayers' contribution. And then if it was to go to a stage 3, that would be another resolution that would have to come back to us. So that would be an entirely different, separate process.
Yes. So
yeah,
so the council is spending a maximum of the 1.3, and if we can collect money towards that, that's good. We'll do our best. If if either of the parties comes along at a point which Amanda will know and say, hey, we've found the extra money, we can bring that here, and then there's an opportunity to progress. But that's entirely subject to an external. Well, it will be one of the 2 groups, but an external group bringing that extra funding to us. I think we're all on the same page.
We're the major funders of Tourism Bay of Plenty.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that
not within the grant that they get.
Yeah. Okay. So, what do you want to put in your recommendation so that externally raised funds?
Well, I suppose there's 2 parts. That any externally raised funds, such as the application to lotteries, are successfully utilised as part of 1.3 million. And proposal to complete the works for the option 3 is totally reliant on external.
Got that, Janie?
Extra external funding. Yeah.
The notes. If we don't get the notes exactly right, we know what you mean.
Yeah, so I've got the externally raised funds to date are utilised as part of the 1.3 million because there's feelers out to various external funders as well as lotteries. And then any proposal to complete stage 3 is reliant on extra external funding and would need to come back to council for a sign off. Yeah. All right, so you've moved that. No, I moved that. You're seconding it. Keep track. Yes, shared.
Sorry. My question was along the same lines as Bill's, is that any additional funding would reduce the ratepayer burden. So, yeah.
Just one observation. I mean, this is one of those projects that both the scope and the risk assessment have changed quite considerably as the project has gone through. And I think it's a worthwhile case study for understanding the risks of projects like this. We had the risk around the consenting, and that caused time delay. That resulted in cost. We had the risks around the physical nature of the works that we are doing. And it would seem that our advisors either didn't assess that risk properly or we weren't fully aware of the extent of that risk going into the project. Don't know quite which of that was, but I think there are important lessons in terms of our procurement and delivery of projects of this nature, particularly when you're dealing with unstable ground, as we knew we were when we went into this. So I guess my point is it's worthwhile learning from this particular case on the value of scope definition and risk assessment, because both those issues have caused us problems. And I suspect there was a bit of optimism bias going into the project. I mean, we all wanted to see it happen, I think, including the commissioners. And certainly the community directly affected wanted to see it happen. But the risk of optimism bias, I think, has popped its head in to this project. Lesson to be learned.
Yep. However, to take nothing away from the amazing job that the contractors have done constructing that walkway and staircases, mainly staircases, through the bush, which it does provide. I think it will provide an amazing trip in itself. Should alleviate some of the neighbours' concerns about people getting lost in the bush and ending up on their properties or clambering through their properties to get down. But I still worry that, stupidity, people will try and get down to the bottom. There will be people that will try and get down to the bottom and cause other people to have to risk their own lives to go and save their stupid skins for the sake of a selfie. But that's human nature. So we're doing the very best that we can. The ratepayers are putting a considerable expenditure into this, and I think it still will be a great experience. So. On that note, I'll move the motion. That's A, B and C. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. So that is the conclusion of can someone like to move that we go into public excluded, shared and Bill for the reasons outlined in the agenda? Any discussion on that?